Sometimes the light at the end of the tunnel is a train.
Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher and welcome to your Ret Paladin guide for 7.25 onwards. The aim of this guide is to get you started on the right road, go through the basics before you end up in the world of tier bonuses and legendaries and simming yourself and all that kind of good stuff. So let's just enjoy what is the fireworks display of a spec. So let's get into how do you set up your Ret Paladin. Now, currently in game, I have to preface this with right now as I'm recording, the Ret Paladin's getting a lot of shit. It has some weaknesses, and it also has some very weird overlapping abilities that we're going to see throughout this video. So you might see some negativity down below, but of course it only takes one patch to fix that and adjust things and swap things around in order to remedy that situation. So that's not going to be the focus of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm just going to talk about how its gameplay works and how you decide on your talents, and generally just how does this whole thing come together is my main focus today. And should you use to try it out and maybe you see something appealing here, then that's going to be pretty cool. But one thing we have to remember, despite any negativity the community might feel right now, is the Ret Paladin looks fucking cool. It looks really, really cool. And aesthetics is a lot to a lot of people. And there's no denying that the Ret Paladin is a flurry of fireworks in most occasions. And that's something that's very appealing to a lot of people. So I would bear that in mind, that it's not all about what the DPS is at maybe the top-end mythic style of things. It's how it plays and how it looks to a lot of people. And let's not forget that the Paladins in general just have the best armor sets ever. Again, very appealing to a lot of people. The Holy Paladin works on a very simple premise, which means it's quite easy to pick up and get playing this thing even if you're relatively new to the game. It works on the idea of holy power. So what you're going to notice above my frame here is that when I use certain abilities, it generates a holy power. You can see I can have up to 5, right? And that will cap out at 5. I can't get 6, right? Anything I try to use to generate a holy power now is just going to waste, right? Because I'm pressing the abilities that should generate holy power, but I already have 5, therefore they're going to waste. So a big part of the Ret Paladin is not wasting any holy power, but still generating as much as possible. This is where you're going to have to make some decisions, because we have a variety of spells that generate different numbers of holy power, and we need to be aware of them all. So our first one is going to be Zeal, if you take the talent, or Crusader Strike as it is as standard. Has a 3.61 second recharge and has a maximum of 2 charges. Now, one of the weaknesses people find with the Ret Paladin is they have so many little spells to manage that have such short cooldowns that moving away from the boss can actually severely hurt the Ret Paladin. And that's because we need these things to constantly be recharging, otherwise we're missing out on holy power. It's a very simple idea. As it has 2 strikes, Zeal or Crusader Strike is something you want to be constantly recharging, right? If I was to sit here with Crusader Strike or Zeal just sat at 2 charges, every 3.6 seconds I'm missing out on a holy power, and that could very quickly add up to a huge loss in damage. So this is something we want to keep recharging. As you can see at the bottom of the tooltip on the left there, though, it generates 1 holy power. So we have this one ability on a 3.6 second cooldown, has 2 charges and generates 1 holy power. We also have Divine Hammer or Blade of Justice, depending on what you take. This has a 9.6 second cooldown and generates 2 holy power, right? So we have one ability that generates 1 holy power, another ability that generates 2. On top of that, we also have our artifact ability, the Wake of Ashes. I'm so sad this thing changed. In the original alpha, this actually dropped Ashbringer from the sky and exploded. Now it's kind of just a fiery bleh onto the targets. But as you can see, that generates 5 holy power. So you can now also build in your mind that we have a little bit of math to do, a very basic kiddie school math. But you have to understand that in order to generate as much holy power as possible without wasting any holy power, we really have to consider what buttons we're pressing in order to maximize that intake, right? It should be pretty easy. If I generate 5, I don't want to use a Divine Hammer and generate 2 because that's going to go nowhere. So the next question is, what the hell do we do with our holy power? Well, we've got a couple of things to do. The next big thing about the Ret Paladin is going to be Judgment. So you'll hear a lot of people call this Colossus Smash. It works very similarly, not exactly the same, but very similarly. Essentially, on every 8.8 seconds, you can see there for me, it judges the target and one other nearby enemy, dealing 313,000 holy damage, don't really care about that, and causing them to take 61% increased damage from your holy power spenders. So every time we press Judgment, right? Every time we press Judgment, we have 8 seconds. You can see the debuff here. We have 8 seconds to spend as much Holy Power as possible, because then Holy Power spenders are going to be getting an enormous damage buff. Yeah, an enormous damage buff. So what we have is this cycle of processes where we generate as much Holy Power as possible, then we judge the target and we spend as much as possible, and then we just try and keep this flowing. You can see I'm generating 5, I'm spending it within Judgment. I'm trying to keep everything on cooldown. Now we've got Judgment back. I'm going to spend it. I'm going to get my Divine Hammer going. I'm going to get my... all I'm doing is trying to keep my Holy Power generators spinning these plates, while simultaneously making sure that I don't waste any, right? And the way we do that is just by generating in between Judgment to then spend as much as possible, to then come back round again when Judgment wears off and say, okay, I'm back to spending Judgment. Nice. Very, very simple. Opening this Judgment window, spending as much as possible, and in the meantime, generating and keeping these generators spinning so that we're not wasting Holy Power. So what do we spend it on? 2 things. We have Templar's Verdict. Templar's Verdict is our single target one, a powerful weapon strike that deals 400,000 holy damage. Now, the strange thing about this is our Blade of Justice, once you get decent gear, actually starts to kind of outweigh this, which is really weird, as this is supposed to be our big finisher. Again, one of those wonky things that's going on with Ret right now. And our other way, if we even have 2 targets, I'm not joking, if we have 2 targets, we use Divine Storm instead. The general idea when this was brought in, and I want to say in the Burning Crusade, it might have been Wrath of the Lich King. I can't remember the first time I tried Divine Storm, but I think it was the Burning Crusade, was that we had one single target finisher and an AoE finisher. That was the whole idea. It was a very simple idea by Blizzard. But the way it's been now for... I want to... Again, I'm going off memory here of one specific spec. I think it's like 3 expansions now. As soon as we have 1 extra target, Divine Storm just becomes superior. It's as simple as that. As you can see, that it just doesn't add up. 400,000 holy damage, Divine Storm, 240,000 holy damage to all nearby enemies. And you can see once we have 2 targets, it's just better to Divine Storm, especially with all the buffs and stuff it gets from our artifact weapon. So a very weird system. But there you go. That's what we do. We generate Holy Power. We keep those generators spinning. We drop a Judgment to open the window to spend them. We spend as much as possible, and we keep that cycle rinsing, repeating, without trying to waste any Holy Power at all. That's the gameplay you're aiming for. But alongside that, we have a huge amount of utility. Our big DPS cooldown is going to be Avenging Wrath, Popping Wings, of course. We'll talk about Crusade in a minute, and I guarantee people can't wait for me to talk about whole Crusade. On top of that, we have our Interrupt, we have our Greater Blessings, okay? Greater Blessings. Please be aware of your Greater Blessings. It's quite sad to see when the healers are begging for the Greater Blessings. You place a blessing on an ally that causes them to regenerate 1% of their maximum health and mana for 10 seconds. Believe me, in the top end, your healers are going to be like, give me fucking wisdom. Give it to me. You can only put it on 1 target, though. You can only put it on 1 target. Alternatively, you have a Greater Blessing of Kings. It places a blessing on an ally that grants them an Absorb Shield. It absorbs up to 91,000 damage, and it automatically refreshes. There you go, even if fully consumed. So they just get this extra shield that they can put on. You can see I've got Greater Blessing of Kings and Greater Blessing of Wisdom right now, so be aware of those. Defensively, of course, we've got the good old bubble. My macro covers the tooltip. The good old bubble with a 5-minute cooldown protects you from all damage and spells for 8 seconds. Cannot be used if you have Forbearance. So Forbearance, once you use a mega spell, like Lay on Hands or something like that, you get this Forbearance debuff, which means you can't just chain mega cooldowns. The Paladin is the king of the mega cooldowns, like Lay on Hands and Divine Shield, Hand of Protection. And therefore, you want to make sure that you're not spamming this ability while you have Forbearance, because that could be a very bad idea. So you have that. We also have the Shield of Vengeance, a very weird spell. 1.5-minute cooldown. This is our like go-to defensive. Unfortunately, it also does damage. As a damage-dealing spec, it's a little odd. Creates a barrier of holy light that absorbs 700,000 damage. That's pretty sick, right? That's pretty sick. When the barrier is consumed, all damage absorbed is dealt by holy damage, divided across all enemies within 8 yards. That's right. So any damage that you actually absorb with this thing will get sent back to the target. Not an unreasonable amount of damage. Obviously, the more difficult content you're doing, you're naturally going to be getting that damage anyway for the most part, so it's not something you have to worry about. But in earlier content, it's kind of like a DPS spell that you're not getting the benefit of, which kind of sucks. It really does kind of suck. We mentioned our blessings earlier. I mentioned it in all the Paladin guides. These are crucial. You should be getting good with using these, because your DPS rotation for the most part is actually very simple, but using the utility of the Ret Paladin is where you're really going to shine, in my opinion. When I noticed the Paladins taking care of their group properly, That's the Paladin I want with me, and I recommend you guys all get used to this stuff and figure out where they're useful. So we have Blessing of Freedom, which places a blessing on a party raid member, granting immunity to movement impairing effects. And I will mention this in every Paladin guide because it's important. There are various abilities in Legion where somebody gets pinned down and takes a lot of damage because they're pinned down. And being able to clear their actual pin down effect, or whatever's rooted them, stops them taking all that damage, making it a very powerful defensive cooldown in some situations. So learn about those. And a Blessing of Protection, the standard one, which places a blessing on a party or raid member, protecting them from all physical attacks for 15 seconds. A bad Ret Paladin, in my opinion, is someone who's just DPS surging, and some adds have run off to the healer because the tank's rooted, can't get to them, or is just not playing well, and you're then not getting a Hand of Protection from you, really, which would have saved your healer and saved the group in many scenarios. Things like that are what you absolutely need to be aware of, because it's utterly crucial to standing out. If you want to get recognized as a good Paladin, get used to using those. Put them on mouse over macros if necessary, and learn to pay attention to what's happening to your party, not only yourself. We have a speed increase in the form of Divine Steed, where we get to mount and run around. One of the best spells ever introduced into Legion. Fucking love it. And also we can cleanse toxins. Good God, the amount of Ret Paladins who don't do this. Oh, it makes me so sad. Cleanses a friendly target, removing all poison and disease effects. Okay, so these are all the kinds of utility spells. And of course, Lay on Hands, the fatty fucking Bombati heal. Heals a friendly target for an amount equal to your maximum HP. It's millions. Cannot be used on a target with Barbarians. You can save lives so often with Lay on Hands. God damn, get used to using it. Oh, it hurts my soul. Gameplay stuff is all pretty standard. It's what else you bring that is important. It's what else you bring. You can also taunt the targets. Yeah, luckily it no longer causes damage, which I think a lot of Ret Paladins were happy about. But you could taunt targets, so handy in so many different scenarios. Self-healing kind of shitty now for anybody who's coming back from, say, Mists of Pandaria. Self-healing on the Ret Paladin, not the best. And we also have Contemplation, where you can kneel down and get a shiny light on you. Pretty awesome, right? Pretty dope. Let's talk about stats for a minute then. What does our Mastery do? Our Mastery, Divine Judgment, is kind of a trap. Increases judgment damage by 69%. That sounds pretty good. And causes judgment to increase damage taken from your holy power spenders by 34%. That sounds amazing. That sounds amazing. No. Unfortunately, once you actually read this properly, it only actually affects like 3 spells. That's not that good. That's not that good, unfortunately, compared to the sheer quantity of damaging spells we're going to be doing, which makes Mastery actually the worst stats right now for the Ret Paladin. So what are the good stats, Preacher? This is Legion! And nothing's so easy. I would always love in every guide to be able to just point you and say, this is what you take always and forever, but unfortunately that is not the case. As a general rule of thumb to get started, though, if you've just capped your Paladin, you want to get started, get some versatility as your prio, get some haste after that, then get some crit, and try and avoid Mastery at all possible costs, right? And that can switch when you get more legendaries, when you get higher gear, all these kind of things come into effect the higher up the tree branch of gear you go, in which case you're in Sim World. Enjoy it. Enjoy your stay, because it's where most of us live at the moment, is simming things. Let's talk about Retribution then. This is a passive ability of the Ret Paladin. When any party or raid member within 40 yards dies, you gain 20% increased damage done. Why? I don't know. It's thematic, is the answer. Legion was all about class theme, so you want to be tracking this in some way if someone dies, but I don't know what to tell you guys. It's a thing. It's in the game. There you go. It's a thing. It's in the game. And there's not much else I can say about that. Let's look at our talents then. So, talents are a little bit wonky. Originally, it kind of looked, and this is one thing I actually did not like the Ret Paladin for when it was first brought into Legion, that they were making it super simple to choose your talents. Now, what they've ended up with is a system that is not super obvious and may lead you into traps, but unfortunately a spec that very rarely alters in any way, shape, or form. So the level below, we have Consecration. Consecrate the land beneath you, causing 300,000 holy damage over 10 seconds to enemies who enter that area. So you would think to yourself, oh, okay, if I'm going to be doing a lot of cleave and stuff, I should take some Consecration. Unfortunately, due to the nature of the other talents, unless you are, like, permanently, and you'd even have to double-check this, permanently doing damage to, like, 4 targets all the time that never, ever move out of your Consecration, doesn't pay off, right? It doesn't pay off. But again, check it out based on the damage you want, based on what your results are. Sim it. Talk to other Ret Paladins. Is there any reason for me to take Consecration ever? Most are going to say no. Execution Sentence should obviously be the single target ability. It costs 3 holy power. It's only got a 16-second cooldown. Used to be our big cooldown back in Walls of Draenor. A hammer that slowly falls from the sky, dealing 750,000 holy damage after 5.6 seconds. So it's a holy power spender, which means it is affected by judgment, right? Is affected by judgment. And in testing, I found a long time ago, this might have changed now, but I actually think this is correct, is that you could cast it before you casted Judgment, which allow you to do some very cool things. You could cast an Execution Sentence, then you could generate some more holy power to spend in the Judgment window, open the Judgment window before Execution Sentence landed, and it got all the benefit of Judgment, right? And as well as the extra spenders you got in there. Once again, though, doesn't quite pay off in real-world scenarios because there are very, very few situations that were raw single target. And not only that, once your gear gets high enough, even on raw single target, it's just not worth it. Again, these are the kind of contradictory things going on with the Ret Paladin right now. Always subject to change. Final Verdict is pretty much the default choice in every single scenario. It increases the damage done by Templar's Verdict by 20% and the damage done by Divine Storm by 10%. You're going to be mixing these spells all the time, right? So what we have here, or what Blizzard aimed to do here, I'm sure, was to have an AoE spell if you were doing lots of AoE, a single target spell for when you were pure single target, and then if you were mixing and matching, Final Verdict. The nature of the game means you're always mixing and matching, which means Final Verdict is just always the best, which is just the situation that you're in right now. At level 30, technically when you first start your Ret Paladin on the Sims that I ran before I did the guide on people who are like 880-ish, 890, the Fires of Justice was the best single target ability. Reduces the cooldown of Crusader Strike by 1 second and gives it a 15% chance to reduce the cost of your next damaging or healing holy power ability by 1, right? So it gets cheaper, so you can fit more finishes in. Unfortunately, Zeal is so damn close even at low item levels, and once you get to higher item levels, it just flat out wins, that in most situations you're taking Zeal. So this is supposed to be the cleave ability, because what it does is the same thing as Crusader Strike, but then it grants you Zeal, causing Zeal attacks to chain to an additional nearby target per stack. Each jump deals 40% less damage for a maximum of 3 stacks. So you get this passive cleave, but as you can see, it straight up just does a lot of damage. And once your damage gets so good, it just becomes better, right? It's as simple as that. It really does just become better. Quite early on in a Ret Paladin's life, so I would just, for the moment, I would just get used to using Zeal. When I say get used to using Zeal, it does nothing to your gameplay, pretty much. It does nothing to your gameplay, which is a little bit sad. Greater Judgment. Your Judgment ability hits 2 additional nearby enemies and always deals a critical strike against targets above 50% health. This is just seriously devalued by the fact that they just gave an ability called Judge Unworthy. When you deal damage to a target afflicted by judgment, it spreads. So the effect of that talent is instantly diminished because you're naturally spreading judgment around. Now, as you can imagine, when you're Divine Storming, having more judgments up means the Divine Storm's going to do more damage as it's a holy power spender, right? We know about that now. Zeal's just not running into any of those issues. As simple as that. We are naturally spreading judgment around. It happens regardless. If once you get some artifact power in there, it just happens anyway. So therefore, you don't need to worry about it. At level 45, you get some CC. Pick whatever the hell you want. At level 60, you're going to be deciding on either Divine Hammer or your Blade of Wrath, okay? So, Blade of Wrath, your auto attacks have a chance to reset the cooldown of Blade of Justice. I know some Rets might disagree with me here, but I was so happy when this came in. Because previous to this, it was not a proc, and Ret Paladins had essentially no reactive gameplay at all. So, when it procs, you have something that happens. Right? Something that changes up the flow rather than just being a standard rotation where your fingers are almost like on this treadmill that you're running and nothing happened. And which is kind of strange considering how proc-based this used to be. How proc-based the Ret Paladin used to be. So if you're doing like raw single target or just a couple of enemies, you're going to be using Blade of Wrath. Blade of Justice hits incredibly hard. Like crazy, crazy hard. It's utterly insane how hard it hits. So you might think, What about Virtue's Blade? Blade of Justice critical strikes now deal 3 times normal damage. That sounds pretty good, but this is just massively dwarfed by how often you get this reset and how hard you start to hit with it naturally. It's massively outweighed. Alternatively, though, Divine Hammer. Divine Hammer spin around you, damaging enemies within 8 yards for 60,000 holy damage instantly and every 1.6 seconds. So obviously you're doing Mythic Plus, you're doing some big cleave, Divine Hammer is going to be superior, right? Pretty simple. Replaces Blade of Justice with this AoE ability. So those are the two you're going to be choosing between. At level 75 for straight damage, you're going with Justicar's Vengeance. 5 holy power. A weapon strike that deals 411,000 holy damage and restores health equal to the damage done. That's good. The 5 holy power for that damage, though, not that good. However, though, deals 100% additional damage and healing when used against a stunned target. Can be clutch in a number of ways. Mega burst and also just superior healing. Yeah, you can have it on demand whenever you want it. Getting to 5 holy power with a reasonably geared Ret Paladin is no big deal at all. Your other choices are Eye for an Eye, reduces the physical damage you take by 35%. Do you need that? That's the question you should be asking. And instantly counterattacks any enemy that strikes you in melee combat for 130,000. Now, obviously, there aren't that many scenarios outside of just being out in the open world where Eye for an Eye is useful, because you need to be physically being attacked, right? So that's something you need to bear in mind. If it's not happening to you, if you're not getting that counteract ability, that's not that useful. But do you need the physical damage reduction? That's down to you. You can soak some things in Tomb of Soulcraft. You can do all that kind of thing. And also, Word of Glory, 3 holy power, 1 minute recharge. Heal yourself and up to 5 friends within 15 yards for 424,000, a maximum of 2 charges. So it can be useful. Again, it costs you holy power, though. You're sacrificing DPS to do something that's 424,000, you know what I mean? It's a holy power spender. It's just like, they're not outstanding, which is the problem. Some people will definitely, I know some people will be like, you should take this, but in most scenarios, you're going to take Justicar's Vengeance. At level 90, Divine Steed in nearly all situations. I talked earlier about how the fact that moving out of range for any reason really fucks with Ret Paladins because of such a low cooldown on all their important abilities. Being able to get out and then get back in super fast is pretty goddamn important to your damage. Pretty goddamn important. You want to be in melee contact as much as humanly possible. You really do. And the Paladins, the Ret Paladins that do that better, they're the ones who are going to be miles ahead of you. They'll just have more spenders and more generators used than you will. Alternatively, Divine Intervention reduces the Divine Shield cooldown by 20%. In addition, any attack which would kill you instead reduces you to 20% of your maximum health and instantly triggers Divine Shield. There are definitely scenarios which could call for that. Usually you're prepared for them anyway, or your healers are prepared for them, certainly in a raid environment. And Judgment of Light. Judgment now applies Judgment of Light to the target, causing the next 40 attacks to heal the attacker for 7,000. Also very helpful, especially if you're not having to move around a lot. Obviously, the benefit of Cavalier is moving around a lot. If you're not moving around a lot, but you are taking good damage, then Judgment of Light is going to be more beneficial, right? Simple process. At level 100, so confusing as to why some of these things exist. Now, Crusade, we have to talk about it. It replaces your Avenging Wrath, and this spec is utterly dominated by Crusade. Like, it's so far ahead of any of the other talents, it's embarrassing. So it replaces your Avenging Wrath. It increases your damage and haste by 3% for 30 seconds. Each holy power spent during Crusade increases the damage and haste by an additional 3%, which means you very quickly build up this enormous damage buff, especially if you set it up. The haste makes you generate more, so you get to this 15 stack for as quick as possible, and then you have artifact traits, like Wrath of the Ashbringer, that increase the duration of Avenging Wrath by 10 seconds. And what that does is mean that you get to 15 stacks, which means you get to your maximum amount of damage, and then you're there for a long time, just doing all this huge beneficial damage. It's so much more damage than any of the other two. It's fucking ridiculous. Ret Paladins, I don't know. Some people love or some people hate it. Honestly, for me, the Ret Paladin is a spec I find difficult to enjoy, except when I'm under the effects of Crusade, when things are going really, really like hyper fast, which is what they are. When you get into this, they're going hyper fast. You can see how quickly I'm stacking things up here and getting it spending and going. You can see how quickly my judgment's now back off cooldown before I've even finished. And you just end up going super fast, and you get to do this. And this feels really quite fun, honestly. Like, I have no issue with this type of gameplay because it feels rapid, it feels responsive, and it's just the only really enjoyable part I find about the Ret Paladin. Unless you're Unless for some reason you want to try the others, you're always taking Crusade as it is right now. But I would certainly look to this to be something that might change in the future because it's so dominant. So what are the other choices then? Holy Wrath deals 200% of your missing health. What the fuck is that supposed to be? And I remember reading this a long time ago and just being befuddled that this was in the game. In holy damage to 4 nearby enemies, up to 120% of your maximum health. Deals 35% of missing health against enemy players. So it does a lot of damage. It's just so crazy that you're trying to lose health to use this big 3-minute cooldown. And it does a lot of damage. But it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre to get the maximum use out of this thing. Because you want to get the maximum use out of this thing. And as somebody who has raided near enough everything in the game up to the Mythic, I'm only missing like 3 bosses right now in 2 Mythic. It just doesn't line up well with anything. And the healers aren't going to leave you on low health because your Holy Wrath is back. It's just dumb. So whatever. Or Divine Purpose. Your Holy Power spending abilities have a 20% chance to make your next Holy Power spending ability free. So you can bring another proc in there, but it's so massively dwarfed by Crusade that it's just not fun. There's no interest to it there. So those are the basic setups to your Ret Paladin to get you started. Obviously, I've brought up some scenarios there where you might want to change. For the most part, you're not going to. Like, this will be, if you take the Ret Paladin, the limit of your respecking will be going like this. And that's about it. That's about it. And this does add some interesting gameplay. As I said, I was so thankful when this came into the Ret Paladin because I got a little fed up with nothing happening on my Ret Paladin that I just didn't want to play. But you can see that's the proc there, which means you have to be aware that that proc is giving you 2 holy powers. So how are you going to use it effectively is the question you want to be asking, right? How are we going to use that? And once you take this, you have this... I'm trying to just get it to proc. I'm not trying to do a segment rotation here. You can see the proc just pops up. And then you've got to decide, what's my current holy power? How can I use this most effectively? Etc, etc. In terms of actual gameplay then, you just have a simple priority system. You want your Zeal or Crusader Strike to be recharging all the time. Okay? But that doesn't mean that you need to spend 2. As long as you have only 1 charge and the other one's recharging, that's done. Your next priority is going to be Blade of Justice. This is only an 8-second cooldown and it hits like a goddamn truck. You can see there's 60,000 damage. Not only that, it has a chance to proc and reset, which means you get a lot of extra ones in. So as long as this is recharging, get your Blade of Justice recharging, right? Next thing you're going to do is get Wake of Ashes on cooldown as quickly as possible, but without wasting the holy power. And that means managing your judgment and your spenders. You'll quickly find, if you keybind these appropriately, you can see I have them like 1, 2, R, which I find very easy to press, and 4. I somehow cannot change Flash of Light and 3 on my keyboard. It's been that forever, and that is the way it will always be. You'll find your fingers naturally fall into a rhythm. And that will happen, and you'll be very responsive when your Blade of Justice procs. So you want to keep those things on cooldown and spend and generate as much holy power as you possibly can throughout a fight and waste as little as humanly possible. That's how the Ret Paladin works. That's what it's all about. Enjoy it. A lot of people love this. It's a relatively simple spec to play. It does have some drawbacks right now, which might change. But honestly, it's something that I know a lot of people really, really enjoy, and my subjective opinion shouldn't matter too much. My conclusion to the Ret Paladin is this. It's nice to simply pick up and play and get used to the idea of managing procs while keeping a nice, simple cycle going, which is something that most specs have in one form or another. So if you're looking to get into DPS and doing it properly, this might be a good place to start for you, honestly. The talent setup isn't something that swaps around a lot, so you're not going to have to learn many, many different playstyles, and I think that actually appeals to a hell of a lot of people, as well as the aesthetic and the theme of the spec. Some things I would recommend then. Obviously, you want something like Tell Me When or Weak Auras, in order to see that those spells are recharging properly. When your procs occur, are you keeping everything going? When is Judgment coming back? When have I got my Holy Power ready? And have them in quite easy view is something I definitely recommend. On top of that, I would also seriously recommend the Paladin Discord. It's absolutely fantastic. The Hammer of Wrath Discord was very, very, very impressed with how they've got things set out. So once you do get into that higher gear, and you're going to have to start simming yourself and working out how to best utilize set bonuses and all that kind of good stuff, that's your next avenue of opportunity. Thank you so much for listening, guys. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.